Hello, everybody. Welcome back for the evening reading. Tonight, we are going to be reading from a teacher named Jiddu Krishnamurti. This book is called Freedom from the Known. I've always been a huge fan of Krishnamurti's, in large part because of, his teachings, but also because his backstory is really, really interesting and refreshing, I think, in our hmm, in our oftentimes out there woo-woo world of spirituality. So he really, to me, is a very concrete, um, beautiful blend of intellect and intuition, really brings them together. And I think speaks very well to those who are maybe more mind dominant and find themselves held hostage sometimes by an overactive mind. And the way his teachings work is, or at least I observe they work, is he really takes that overactive mind and he says, okay, let's focus that awareness here. Let's really look into that. And of all the lessons I think I've learned from his teachings, it's that typically when we're hitting some kind of inner resistance, some kind of obstacle in our introspection, our meditation, what have you, usually the problem is that we're pulling up short, right? We're just not going far enough. We're scared to ask the bigger question, the deeper question. And his style of teaching just, it almost kind of like pushes you. He just says like, come on, look, look, and not just look, but look for yourself. So often in this world of spirituality and gurus and all that nonsense, spirituality is not nonsense. Gurus often nonsense. His point is, at the end of the day, you have to look into truth for yourself. No person reading from a book, no person across the internet can tell you what the truth is, because at the end of the day, it only is the truth if it resonates with something in you. And of all the deep truths that one can access or uncover in the inner path or the introspective path, I can't meditate for you. I can't practice mindfulness for you. I can't do the work for you. Only you can do that. So Krishnamurti, of all the teachers that I have encountered, always brings it back to, okay, look into it. Look into it for yourself. A quick little backstory on Krishnamurti, and then we'll dive in. Krishnamurti was part of at least early on in his life, was part of a spiritual group known as the Theosophists. And I'm not a historian, uh, period, but I'm also not deeply versed in theosophy. However, I do know that one of the central ideas of theosophy was that every single millennia or generation, some large swath of time, there during those periods of time, there's always one world teacher. And in their view, Jesus Christ was one such world teacher. The Buddha was one such world teacher. Muhammad was one such world teacher. And they thought, and Krishnamurti was around in the 1900s, and essentially they thought he was the world teacher of the 20th century. They thought he was the dude, the guy. And what's so cool is that they plucked him out when he was just a young boy and said, this is the one, the anointed one. And when he actually rose to the position of leading this group, what's the first thing that Krishnamurti did? He said, let's disband this thing. We shouldn't have all this, dogma and structure, and you all shouldn't be following me. You should be pursuing truth for yourself. And the name of the talk he delivered when he rose to that position was called "Truth is a Pathless Land." And what that means is, you probably know what it means already, but what it means is that when it comes to finding truth, nobody can give you a map. Right? Others can try to help you. They can try to give you all the tools they can to dig and look. But at the end of the day, truth is a pathless land. There is no way to show the way. At the end of the day, you have to walk it. You have to look for yourself. So with that, let's dive in. I'm reading from chapter 8. Again, we're reading from Freedom from the Known, which jumped out to me on the bookshelf just because, we really are entering the unknown right now. Technically, we're always entering the unknown. We just are. But in this current pandemic situation where old structures and systems are being pushed to their breaking points, and many are breaking, we don't know what the new normal is going to look like. We don't have some crystal clear picture, and that can make us really uncomfortable and anxious and scared, and that's normal. But at the same time, wouldn't you be a little bit, I don't know, bored if you always knew what was going to happen? Right? I think you would. So I think this chapter goes into how we can find comfort in the unknown. So I'm going to jump in actually a little, well, we'll start from the beginning. This early part is a little bit dense, but stick with him. He's always setting up something good for later. It's chapter 8. Chapter 8 dives into freedom, revolt, solitude, innocence, living with ourselves as we are. None of the agonies of suppression, nor the brutal discipline of conforming to a pattern, has led to truth. To come upon truth, the mind must be completely free, without a spot of distortion. But first, let us ask ourselves if we really want to be free. When we talk of freedom, are we talking of complete freedom, or of freedom from something inconvenient, or unpleasant, or undesirable? We would like to be free from painful and ugly memories and unhappy experiences, but keep our pleasurable, satisfying ideologies, formulas, and relationships. But to keep one without the other is impossible, for as we have seen, pleasure is inseparable from pain. Sometimes I think people on that last line get confused on what that means, so I'll just clarify. If you've ever cared about something, if you've ever loved someone, that gave you pleasure, right? And if you ever lost that thing or that person, the inverse is pain. So that's what he's referring to there. So it is for each one of us to decide whether or not we want to be completely free. If we say we do, then we must understand the nature and structure of freedom. Is it freedom when you are free from something, free from pain, free from some kind of anxiety? Or is freedom itself something entirely different? You can be free from jealousy, say, but isn't that freedom a reaction and therefore not freedom at all? You can be free from dogma very easily by analyzing it, by kicking it out. But the motive for that freedom from dogma has its own reaction, because the desire to be free from a dogma may be that it is no longer fashionable or convenient. Or you can be free from nationalism because you believe in internationalism, or because you feel it is no longer economically necessary to cling to this silly nationalistic dogma with its flag and all that rubbish. You can easily put that away. Or You may react against some spiritual or political leader who has promised you freedom as a result of discipline or revolt. But has such rationalism, such logical conclusion, anything to do with freedom? If you say you are free from something, it is a reaction, which will then become another reaction, which will bring about another conformity, another form of domination. In this way, you can have a chain of reactions and accept each reaction as freedom. But it is not freedom. It is merely a continuity of a modified past, which the mind clings to. Okay, that was the dense part. It's going to get better. I'm not going to get in the way of what he's doing. But again, if you ever have questions, if there's a confusing line that you really want to dive in on, you know where to find me. The youth of today, like all youth, are in revolt against society. And that is a good thing in itself. But revolt is not freedom, because when you revolt, it is a reaction. And that reaction sets up its own pattern, and you get caught in that pattern. You think it is something new. It is not. It is the old in a different mold. Any social or political revolt will inevitably revert to the good old bourgeois mentality. I always struggled with that one. Didn't speak French. Bourgeois. The good old bourgeois mentality. Freedom comes only when you see and act, never through revolt. The seeing is the acting, and such action is an instantaneous, let me try one more time. The seeing, we'll take that paragraph fresh, because there was a door. Freedom comes only when you see and act, never through revolt. The seeing is the acting, and such action is as instantaneous as when you see danger. Then there is no cerebration, thinking, no discussion or hesitation. The danger itself compels the act, and therefore to see is to act and to be free. What he's pointing to here is so often we get caught up in our minds, right? We get caught up in an endless thought process that we think, of course, is going to produce a solution. It's going to help us know what to do, know what to say. But at the end of the day, oftentimes it's that unaffected, uncontrived, unmanipulated naturalness, which is what we're really trying to achieve. And to say achieve makes it seem like, oh, I'm going to go do this thing. But what he's saying is what we should be cultivating within ourselves is the capacity to simply be as we are. And let me just say, the process of doing this whole thing is definitely an exercise for me in that, because there's no script here. And when I realize that certain things here are going to be a little bit dense or confusing and I want to unpack them, I haven't thought through how I'm going to unpack it. And I'm sure sometimes I don't do a good job. But the point is how can we learn to just trust that innate intelligence? That's where the freedom really comes from, is not getting stuck up in all the, as he said, the cerebration. Never seen that word before, right? And just finding a way to respond to the moment, to be with the moment as it is. He continues, freedom is a state of mind, not freedom from something, but a sense of freedom, a freedom to doubt and question everything, and therefore so intense, active, and vigorous that it throws away every form of dependence, slavery, conformity, and acceptance. Such freedom implies being completely alone. But can the mind brought up in a culture so dependent on environment and its own tendencies ever find that freedom, which is complete solitude, and in which there is no leadership, no tradition, and no authority? Again, truth is a pathless land, right? This solitude is an inward state of mind which is not dependent on any stimulus or any knowledge, and is not the result of any experience or conclusion. Most of us inwardly are never alone. There is a difference between isolation, or cutting oneself off, and aloneness or solitude. We all know what it is to be isolated, building a wall around oneself in order never to be hurt, never to be vulnerable, or cultivating detachment, which is another form of agony, or living in some dreamy ivory tower of ideology. Aloneness is something quite different. You are never alone because you are full of all the memories, all the conditioning, all the mutterings of yesterday. Your mind is never clear of all the rubbish it has accumulated. To be alone, you must die to the past. Just make sure you didn't miss that last part, guys. To the past. To be alone, you must die to the past. In other words, to be truly here and now and present in your experience, regardless of what's happening around you. You cannot be living inside memories. You can't be living inside even future projections, right? You can't be living in what was or what could be. You need to be fully here, fully present, because that's where your deepest intelligence can come through. I say that, and now I've completely lost my place here. Let's see here. Okay. To be alone, you must die to the past. When you are alone, totally alone, not belonging to any family, any nation, any culture, any particular continent, there is that sense of being an outsider. The man who is completely alone in this way is innocent, and it is this innocency that frees the mind from sorrow. Let me read that one more time. The man or woman who is completely alone in this way is innocent, and it is this innocency that frees the mind from sorrow. We carry about with us the burden of what thousands of people have said and the memories of all our misfortunes. To abandon all that totally is to be alone. And the mind that is alone is not only innocent, but young, not in time or age, but young, innocent, alive at whatever age. And only such a mind can see that, and only such a mind can see that which is truth and that which is not measurable by words. Let me play that back one more time. To abandon all, to abandon all that totally is to be alone. And the mind that is alone is not only innocent, but young, not in time or age, but young, innocent, alive at whatever age. And only such a mind can see that which is truth and that which is not measurable by words. So before I started really digging into spiritual and introspective literature, I always thought that truth and knowledge were the same thing. And sometimes they are used kind of interchangeably, but the truth which he is pointing to here is different than, the kind of knowledge you can look up on Wikipedia, right? The truth he's talking about is a truth that defies concepts, it defies mental machinations. It's not approachable by words, it's not measurable by words, as he said. And if that's a little bit meta, fair enough. But I would ask you to consider experiences in your life where you just find your mind completely quiet and completely still, right? Maybe it happens when you are looking in the eyes of your child. Maybe it happens when you're looking in the eyes of someone you care about deeply or love. Maybe it happens when you're looking at a beautiful sunset, right? Or just some beautiful natural scene. Maybe your whole mind just goes completely quiet and still. In that stillness, you're not blank. You're not devoid of life. You are deeply alive. It's just that there's no obstruction to that. There's no separation. I'll keep going. In this solitude, you will begin to understand the necessity of living with yourself as you are, not as you think you should be or as you have been. See if you can look at yourself without any tremor, any false modesty, any fear, any justification or condemnation. Just live with yourself as you actually are. All of us in home isolation, I think these are the right words, right? We need these. It is only when you live with something intimately that you begin to understand it. But the moment you get used to it, get used to your own anxiety or envy or whatever it is, you are no longer living with it. If you live by a river, after a few days, you do not hear the sound of the water anymore. Or if you have a picture in the room, which you see every day, you lose it after a week. It is the same with the mountains, the valleys, and the trees, the same with your family, your husband, your wife. But to live with something like jealousy, envy, or anxiety, you must never get used to it, never accept it. You must care for it as you would care for a newly planted tree, protect it against the sun, against the storm. You must care for it, not condemn it or justify it. Therefore, you begin to love it. When you care for it, you are beginning to love it. It is not that you love being envious or anxious, as many people do, but rather that you care for watching. This is kind of what I was talking about earlier. His insistence on not just being carried away by your mind's thoughts, but really looking, really watching what is happening within yourself without judgment, right? In the course of, today, for example, I've had no shortage of moments where I was like, what the hell am I doing? Lost, confused, anxious, all the normal human stuff. And the key for me to get out of those little funks is just to become deeply curious. Why am I feeling this way? Okay, let me just sit. Let me just watch. Let me just observe what's coming up, you know? And also what helps is cold showers, long walks, bike rides with masks. Okay. Sorry, guys. I got to entertain myself because you're all so far away, and the peanut gallery in here is pretty limited. So forgive me. So, can you and I live with what we actually are, knowing ourselves to be dull, envious, fearful, believing we have tremendous affection when we have not, getting easily hurt, easily flattered and bored? Can we live with all that, neither accepting it nor denying it, but just observing it without becoming morbid, depressed, or elated? Now, let us ask ourselves a further question. Is this freedom, this solitude, this coming into contact with the whole structure of what we are in ourselves, is it to be come upon through time? That is freedom to be achieved through a gradual process? Obviously not, because as soon as you introduce time, you are enslaving yourself more and more. You cannot become free gradually. It is not a matter of time. I'm sure he's going to get to this, otherwise I'll loop back. The next question is, can you become conscious of that freedom? If you say, I am free, then you are not free. It is like a man saying, I'm happy. The moment he says, I'm happy, he is living in a memory of something that has gone. Freedom can only come about naturally, not through wishing, wanting, longing, nor will you find it by creating an image of what you think it is. To come upon it, the mind has to learn to look at life, which is a vast movement, without the bondage of time, for freedom lies beyond the field of consciousness. I'm going to play that last paragraph one more time, and then we'll unpack it. So he says, you cannot become free gradually. It is not a matter of time. So the next question is, can you become conscious of that freedom? If you say, I am free, then you are not free. It's kind of like someone who says, I'm cool. When a person says, I'm cool, they're probably not that cool. Sorry, that's a vestige from my advertising days. One of my old bosses always used to say that. Okay. The next question is, can you become conscious of that freedom? If you say, I am free, then you are not free. It is like a man saying, I am happy. The moment he says, I am happy, he is living in a memory of something that has gone. Freedom can only come about naturally, not through wishing, wanting, longing, nor will you find it by creating an image of what you think it is. To come upon it, the mind has to learn to look at life, which is a vast movement, without the bondage of time, for freedom lies beyond the field of consciousness. So here I come back to one of my favorite words, and the one that we kind of opened with our evening readings when we were reading Eckhart Tolle's work, this term presence, of being fully here and now, fully aware, and not living inside, mental abstractions and concepts and things like that, but truly being in the here and now. And as he says here, the moment you say, oh, I'm happy, you have pulled yourself out of the moment, right? You think you're saying, I'm enjoying myself, this is wonderful. But what's really occurring is you're kind of like zooming out from the moment, which you were just immersed in deeply and enjoying, and become an observer. Better example, we all know those people who, when you're at a really great party and you're having a great time with each other, they pull out the camera and then they live in the camera. Right? They are quite literally creating a separation between themselves and the experience. And when you do that, you become an observer in your life rather than an actual person living your life. So he says here, nor will you find it being freedom, by creating an image of what you think it is. Here my mind goes straight to, the American dream and consumer culture. Right? You think you can get the money and the job and the house and all the trappings, and that is what's going to make you feel like, king of the hill, and you're going to feel free, and you're going to feel like the world can't touch you. But that's obviously not true. You're still, you're still held down by your mortgage and, all the bills and all the jobs. Like you're still caught up in something. You're still wrapped up in something. So what does he say? What's the solution here? If it's not, chasing an image, if it's not attaining some outer manifestation of what you think is going to produce that inner state, that feeling, what is it? He says, to come upon freedom, the mind has to learn to look at life as a vast movement without the bondage of time. So, you know what? I'm going to hold back on even interpreting this one. I'm just going to read a couple more times, then I'm going to pull this thing to a close. To come upon freedom, the mind has to learn to look at life, which is a vast movement, without the bondage of time, for freedom lies beyond the field of consciousness. To come upon it, the mind has to look at life, which is a vast movement, without the bondage of time, for freedom lies beyond the field of consciousness. Okay, I can't help myself. I gotta offer one more thought, which is the deeper we go into the present moment, the more we give ourselves over to an intelligence greater than our little egoic conditioned mind, the more alive we feel, the more free we feel. If I'm sitting over here, reading off some other script, then I'm not free. Right? I'm not really speaking from my deepest place. I'm living in a world of simulated thinking and simulated thought, and that's not freedom. So this word freedom is so central to our American identity. And what I would suggest to you all is that the real freedom we're after, what we really hunger for, is that freedom that comes from feeling fully alive, fully ourselves, unrestrained, not held down, not limited by any external forces or any internal forces. And that's a tricky one. It's a tricky one because the outer world is always trying to make us fit right into boxes, trying to make sense of us through the filter of what the world has seen before. But you, my friend, are a once in a lifetime, you're a one-time occurrence. There's never going to be another you. And yet you live in a world where people are always trying to get you to fit in, to get with the program. And for a large part of our life, I think because we're social beings that just want to belong, we play the game. We get in, and we don't even realize we're doing this. We get in the flow of the game, and we don't think twice. But as Krishnamurti points out here, life is a vast movement. Right? It's a living, breathing thing, and if we really want to dance with life, if we want to get down with life, if we want to have an awesome and full life, then we cannot be restrained by the past. We cannot be chasing some future. We can't be in the field of time. We need to be right here, right now. So with that, I encourage you all during this time to use the difficult and challenging energies of isolation and anxiety and loneliness to become true observers of your thoughts, to become truly aware of them, and to recognize that what we're all really after is that feeling of being completely alive, as Joseph Campbell would say. And to have that, we need to cultivate freedom within ourselves. And that means letting go of the past and also not getting caught up in the future. The present is where it's at. All right. Thanks, guys.